a year after his original haunting from A Christmas Carol. Scrooge is trying to be a good person. He's looking forward to his first Christmas because he's really going to prove himself. And then he starts kind of like coming across tasty opportunities to make money and taking them. And then he finds a dead body, and then his clerk is arrested for murder. And then the ghost of the person who died is starting to haunt him. So he's got all sorts of pressures on him to solve the crime.
Hello and welcome to Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the writers behind them. I'm Sophie Beal.
And I'm Steve Couch. And we're joined today by Andreina Cordani. Welcome, Andreina.
Hello.
Andreina is a former journalist who has written for Cosmopolitan, Marie Claire, Good Housekeeping, The Guardian and The Telegraph, among many others. And then wrote 2 YA novels before switching to a genre that I didn't know I needed in my life, the Christmas murder mystery. And I have to say I'm now hooked. First, there was The 12 Days of Murder, which came out in 2023.
That's right.
That was followed last year by one of my favourite books of the year, Murder at the Christmas Emporium.
Oh. Which was also nominated for a Crime Dagger Award.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And we're going to come on to that. And then her new book, which is out now, and which is even better than those two, is A Scrooge Mystery, which we are going to be mainly talking about today. So lovely to have you here, Andreina.
Really nice to be here.
As we said, Murder at the Christmas Emporium, your book before this one, was recently nominated for a Crime Writers Association Whodunnit Dagger Award. So what was that like?
It was really super exciting. It wasn't actually the easiest book to write. It was one of those ones where I had a very short deadline, because Christmas is one of those deadlines that you can't move. People are really not very understanding about that sort of thing.
No.
I was writing to a really short deadline, so I just rushed into it and I didn't get to do very much planning. I'm not a massive planner anyway, but I ended up having to rewrite like the first quarter of the book because it just wasn't working. And there was a few times when I might have been not feeling so great about the book. And then to be nominated for an award was just amazing. And also just because Christmas crime, I was thinking, well, maybe it doesn't, not that it doesn't count in some way, but but that it's it's so niche,
seasonal,
yes.
And it's very seasonal, and people do tend to forget about it for like 9 months of the year. That it's stuck in people's head enough to kind of be on that short list. And I also got to go to a party and dress up in a fancy frock, which was also good.
Any particular stories from the party that you can tell?
I did get hopelessly lost on the way in, so I was a bit nervous about the fancy frock when I first got there, and then I walked in and there were people dressed in like it was the Met Gala pretty much. There's people in head to toe sequins sashaying up this red carpet, and I was like, oh no, I'm underdressed. And so I wandered into this ballroom and then realised it was some charity gala thing, that the tickets obviously were really expensive and it's really fancy, and I realised I was in the wrong place, so I went up some stairs and then I arrived in another room that was crowded with people who were all wearing business suits and smart dresses, and I was like, oh no, God, I'm massively overdressed rather. And I was just completely mortified. Then I realised everyone was wearing little lanyards and it was somebody's work do. And then I went down a corridor and up in a lift and then out, and I finally managed to find the award ceremony. And by that point, they'd finished all the nice drinks beforehand, and they were at the tables having their canapes or their starters. And I sort of had to kind of edge in late, and it was a bit embarrassing. But I was at least dressed at the right level.
You started your career as a journalist.
Yeah.
How did you get into journalism?
I wanted to be a writer. And I wanted to write books, but books were this holy, untouchable thing because they were so very, very special.
Yes.
And magazines, and well, it wasn't magazines at first. I had this really weird idea that I was going to be Kate Adie and I'd be like, out reporting on revolutions and stuff. After doing a history degree in university, which everyone will tell you history degrees are really useful in life, I just kind of stumbled on this journalism course. And I did a year's journalism course, and it sort of like demystified it for me. And I spent a long time, I was the albatross of British magazine publishing, because I worked for 3 or 4 different magazines and that just folded one after the other, just within months of me working on them. And then eventually I managed to get a job at That's Life, which was one of the, which is still going. Yes. Still going strong, and it's like, you know, a women's weekly magazine that does all the shocking true life stories of love rats and crime and betrayal and miracle babies and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I just had, back in the day, you couldn't have, you know, we didn't have Zoom. Most of our interviewees didn't even have phones. You had to arrange all the interviews with telegrams and stuff, or you had to get them to come to their mate's house, and you could ring them at their mate's house. I used to go around to their houses and sit on their sofas and just hear these most shocking, fascinating, just horrific tales of stuff that can happen to people, and it just sort of feeds into writing books in a way. And a lot of my early ideas were not taken from these real people, but they were like, God, that's an impossible situation. I wonder what would happen if you also had this crazy characteristic.
Yeah.
So I'd sort of like mix up. The other thing about it is just people react so differently to every situation. And that's the thing that fascinated me as well. It's like, you know, the sensible thing to do is this, but you decided to punch the guy in the face. Why is that? And I got to ask those rude questions as well. Like, did it occur to you it wasn't legal? You know, it just got me into the heads of other people, and, you know, that was massively inspiring.
Which is a key thing for a writer.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
A fiction writer.
And if you want to write characters that aren't like little versions of you, it's like the first skill that you can have.
How does that background feed into what you write now?
So what it does is it makes you more aware of deadlines, makes you more able to work with tight deadlines. It makes you slightly less, only slightly, less vulnerable to criticism.
Yes.
Like, you know, because in journalism, editors can be a lot harsher, and they write, you know, this is swear word, swear word. All over your copy. At least they used to. They probably don't do that anymore.
They've probably got a higher tech way of doing the same thing.
They've got nicer, less kind of HR unfriendly ways of saying this is shit. But they're still essentially saying the same thing. But yeah, basically you get this, you get very, very rapid, very negative feedback, and you toughen up, which you don't. Like, publishers are so nice. Generally just say, could you just maybe change that?
Yes.
Quite working, but you're very talented and we love you.
I've been reading The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz, and the character in there is an editor, and she says at one point, just seeing how far you could push the novel before he broke.
Generally, the ones, the editors I've had in fiction publishing are, I mean, not saying they're not serious business people, because they absolutely are, but they're much cuddlier than editors in magazines and newspapers.
Your first 2 novels, which I will confess I've not read, are a YA.
Yeah.
And then you switched to, as we said, the Christmas murder mysteries. What's the appeal in writing crime fiction?
I really like high stakes. I really like it when, you know, it's sort of there's a bunch of characters who are having some extreme pressure put on them, and crime is one way of delivering that.
Yes.
I'm not saying that I never want to write another genre, because I do. I love all genres. And if I had, you know, if I was going to live for 200 years, I'd just write across all the genres. I chose crime. I just enjoy creating really, really stressful situations for my children.
As long as it's someone else going through it. Then,
yeah, exactly.
What made you want to write a ghost crime novel then? Because that's quite a niche.
The funny thing is that ghosts kept creeping into everything I did. So there's no ghost in like my first 2 YA novels. But one of my characters in 12 Days of Murder was a bit obsessed with folklore and the occult and the supernatural. And there is a chapter where she kind of is kind of made to, or is motivated to do something by thinking that there's a ghost there. And, you know, I had this rule in my head that you can't really have ghosts because, you know, this is a crime novel. So I just had like a little implication of a ghost. And then in Murder at the Christmas Emporium, I had a stronger implication of a ghost. You know, it is fair play, though. You know, the rules, Detective Club rules from the 1920s, like Agatha Christie, etc. They always said there must be no supernatural mumbo jumbo and jiggery pokery. But unfortunately, I've completely and utterly
a Scrooge Mystery.
There's quite a lot of mumbo jumbo and jiggery pokery in it. But that said, I don't think it's cheating. It's not like, you know, oh, it's an impossible crime, that's because a ghost did it. It's not that kind of ghost, like the thing where you feel let down. The ghosts are intimately involved in the story. A year after his original haunting from A Christmas Carol, Scrooge is trying to be a good person. He's looking forward to his first Christmas because he's really going to prove himself. And then he starts kind of like coming across tasty opportunities to make money and taking them, and then he finds a dead body, and then his clerk is arrested for murder, and then the ghost of the person who died is starting to haunt him. So he's got all sorts of pressures on him to solve the crime. So yeah, the ghost kept creeping in, basically, in a non-sinister way. And then I've always loved historical novels. I was obsessed with Georgette Heyer when I was a teenager, and I wrote all my teenage diaries in really, really cringingly embarrassing Georgette Heyer language.
I think that's something to be proud of, personally.
And I said, I must needs go to the school disco. And then I love historical fiction, and I absolutely love like supernatural stuff as well. You know, my obsessions were things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that. So, you know, I really loved anything with a bit of supernatural in it too. And like the other thing about Scrooge that always intrigued me, was you always see him in the final shot and he's like, I shall keep Christmas in my heart. And he's dancing around, depending on whether it's a musical or not. Sometimes he's dancing around and throwing coins, and sometimes he's just like, you know, smiling upon Tiny Tim. But you know, and he was a merry man from ever after. And I was like, how do you completely change your personality like that? How can you just suddenly become a good person, TM? You know, and when you're in Victorian Britain, what is a good person as well? Because their idea of what's a good person and our idea are very different anyway. And so there was just so much like tasty material there that wasn't even anything to do with crime. So I got super excited about that, and then I told my editor, the editor of Murder at the Christmas Emporium, and she got super excited about it too. We were like jigging up and down in our chairs talking about it. So then we decided to do it.
and with the picking up on the whole Christmas Carol 1 year on, it's such a natural fit then to make the ghosts a major part. And it is a story full of ghosts, and it's a story full of a sense of our actions, or the character's actions, being judged by the ghosts. So how aware were you of the ghost of Charles Dickens looking over your shoulder as you were writing?
Oh God, he's so annoying. He keeps like, you know, sometimes the keys just start to move spontaneously, and I'm like, no, we don't say those words anymore. You've made your sentence 3 times longer than it should be. I'm painfully conscious of the fact that I am not Charles Dickens, and I'm hopefully not even pretending to be Charles Dickens. I'm hoping that somewhere, wherever he is, he's approving. And if not, then some awful thing will befall me, I'm sure. He'll turn up at my house on Christmas Eve with some chains and just have a right old moan.
For what it's worth, I would say my favourite literary adaptation to film of any kind, and my favourite Dickens adaptation is A Muppet Christmas Carol, which I think is one of the most
everyone's favourite.
but it's one of the most faithful renditions of A Christmas Carol
in a strange way.
a strange way.
And you have that curious thing where Michael Caine just plays it completely and utterly straight and ignores the fact that anyone is a Muppet.
I read somewhere that in A Muppet Christmas Carol it works because Michael Caine treats all the Muppets as if they're human actors.
Yeah.
Whereas in Muppet Treasure Island it works because Tim Curry plays it as if he's a Muppet.
It's a Muppet, yeah, I saw that meme as well. It does make sense, yeah.
But to me, your book felt like it was faithful to the spirit of the original.
I tried to cut through because there's been so many adaptations, and it's amazing actually how. So there is one thing in there that is not faithful to the book, and it was kind of deliberate because in almost every adaptation, when he's going off with the spirits, there's always a scene where he's flying over London in the snow.
Yes,
he does not fly over London in the snow in the original book, but I sort of wanted him to have that view from above London at one point, so I sort of just incorporated it.
Yeah.
And
but that's engaging with the tradition that has built up.
Yeah.
Even if it's not strictly.
Yeah. So that's one time when I definitely stepped away from the other thing that I remember trying to puzzle over. Thanks for this, Dickens. Is so there's this description of Scrooge's house, and it's like down the darkest, meanest alley, and he just lives in a house that it's just his, like, where he lives in like a couple of rooms in a house, and the rest of the house is just offices because it's so soulless and everything, which is great. And it's really it's so dark, he has to feel his way down the alleyway to get into his house. And then on Christmas morning he opens the window and says, "Boy, what day is it?" And there's a kid passing by. Yes. So it's like, is his house on the main road, or is it down a dark alley where nobody ever goes?
Yeah.
That
Dickens didn't know what he was doing.
Continuity errors.
What was your relationship with A Christmas Carol before you had the idea of writing this? I mean, was it a cherished favourite, or just that familiar story that everybody knows?
I think, as I said, it has always just raised that question in me. Like, even when I was little, I remember watching TV adaptations before I'd even read the book. I did try it. I had like the Purnell Kids Classics of it, but I don't think I got very far when I was young. Yeah. But I can remember watching, one of the various adaptations and going, "Oh, so he's just nice now."
Yes.
Okay. But is he going to give all his money away, or just some of his money? And then how is he going to decide how much money to give away? I was obviously a really strange child.
No, I think you were obviously, even then, that journalistic urge was there.
Yes.
And that's the thing, like, he's at the beginning of the book, he's puzzling over, like, if I eat gruel for breakfast, does that make me a horrible miser, or does that mean I'm saving more money so I can give it to the poor? Like,
yes,
that's
really,
a genuinely weird question.
So, what does Christmas mean to you apart from book launches?
Well, it's a kind of strange thing, because as a parent, Christmas completely transforms.
Yeah.
So my kids are 9 and 12, and we're now at an age where, unfortunately, they read a book about, called "What's My Tween Thinking?" It was lying around the house, and it was all supposed to be like, parenting guidance. And they picked it up, and I thought, that's fine. It's nice that they know that I'm thinking about their psychology or whatever. And they were reading it, they were really interested, so they got to the page where it says Santa doesn't exist. But they sort of like did this weird thing where they just put the book down and they just never spoke of it. And now we're in this within this lovely bubble where and actually I don't know whether we should include this, because I make a policy of never publicly saying that Santa doesn't exist.
No. You were reporting that the book said that.
The book said that.
Yeah,
well, the book was saying, asking questions about Santa.
Yes.
And questioning the fact that he exists. Yes. And saying how to discuss the reality of Santa with your child. But basically, they put the book down. They sort of never spoke of it again, and now we live in this bubble where they're pretending they believe, and we're pretending that we believe they believe, and everyone gets presents.
I can't see why that doesn't work.
No, I mean, it works for all of us, except for my bank manager.
What has Christmas ever done wrong to you? What makes you want to throw lots of murders into the Christmas mix?
So this is the thing I find really interesting about like the tradition of Christmas. Even before we had the Christmas, Christian Christmas, the tradition of Christmas in midwinter, lots and lots of cultures would have this. They'd have a big festivity somewhere around the shortest day of the year, where they'd save up all their food and they'd have a big blowout, and there would be, sort of feasting and drinking and dancing and everything. And it's like, so you've got this, and the reason they have it, and a lot of the ceremonies, the traditional ceremonies, like things like the Yule log and stuff like that, are all to remind us that there is light, and the light will come again, and that spring will come again. And, that's why we bring the greenery in as well. So we have this little kind of, I don't want to say bubble again because I already said bubble. We have this little kind of pocket of cosy warmth in the middle of harsh winter. And then in the middle of that, you have a little tiny pocket of deep darkness. The reason that Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol as a ghost story is because traditionally people told ghost stories around the fire on Christmas Eve. So it was already an idea that was there. And then over the years, that has kind of morphed, where away from the supernatural and into crime, like in the golden age of detective fiction, in the sort of interwar years and beyond, like A Christie for Christmas was a thing they spoke about. And obviously sometimes she wrote Christmas theme ones, and lots of other people did too. Georgia Hare, Nio Marsh, quite a few golden age detective fiction authors did write specifically Christmas-based crime novels. And then I think because cozy crime has become such a big thing, it's taking off again, and it's becoming more and more, like every year I see more different variations on it. It's really varied now, so there's something for everyone. So you've got, the sort of basic Christie-esque ones, a bit like the 12 Days of Murder, you've got the ones that are very puzzly, that have got these fantastic old-fashioned clue finders in, like Miss Winter in the Library with the Dagger, which is out this year. And then you've got the mine is kind of historical and a bit gothic, and then you've got sort of Happy Bloody Christmas, which was the sort of, is it quite hilarious kind of middle-class woman finds a dead body in her walk-in pantry, and has to hide it from her in-laws.
We've all been there.
Yeah,
that's actually really relatable.
Yeah, super relatable. But so there's a lot out there, basically, a lot of variety, and it is a growing market, and very popular, and people just seem to really like it. When I told them what I was writing, the 12 Days of Murder, their eyes would light up, and they go,
yes,
that's something I actually want to read.
The major conflict in the book seems to me to be he feels he has to celebrate Christmas with all its trappings for his redemption, but he's having an awful time, and everybody else around him is having an awful time. And it seems to talk a lot about the commercialization of Christmas. Was that deliberate?
It's interesting because Christmas has always been commercial. If you think back to those Yule celebrations, the midwinter pre-Christian celebrations, what they would do is they would save up everything they had and then have a big blowout and a big feast in the middle of winter. Back before there was money, that was just about saving up the crops you've grown. But as soon as there was money, it was about buying things. It was still about saving up your resources and then buying them to have lots of really nice things around the Christmas season. And actually, if you look into the modern Christmas that we got partly through Charles Dickens and other influences, like 1843 was when Christmas Carol came out, and it was also the year of the publication of the first ever Christmas card, or the first proper Christmas card, which I also riff about in the book. Then Christmas crackers came like a decade or so later. The Christmas tree towards the end of the 1840s is when it became really popular. So like the royal family always had them pretty much.
I just absolutely love the line where there is a Christmas tree, and there are candles lighting the tree, and someone, I think it was Scrooge, observes this and just says, those candles, that looks a bit dangerous. that thing could go up like an I don't know what. which I love that line. I laughed out loud at that.
I kind of got really happy putting that line in, and I'm really glad that you spotted it. No, I had fun writing it. It could go up like I don't know. But yeah, I love anachronisms in as long as they're not too jarring. I love to stick an anachronism in a historical novel.
But that one was very nice.
So modern Christmas kind of developed around that time, and it happened at a time when we were moving away from the country economy into a more urban economy, and people were, and so Christmas was changing. So when Christmas, like, in fact, the Scrooge book I'm working on at the moment sort of talks about this change of Christmas, because old school Christmas was very much about getting as drunk as you possibly could and shoving as much food down your gob. And
that's changed, you say?
Well, not massively, but now at least we sort of dress it up. But there's also like a lot of the Christmas traditions, the Christmas Carol Christmas traditions, involved people going from house to house and begging for food or alms or food or drink or whatever. The wassail wassail bowl would go round, and it was all community, and it was all shared and spirited and everything, but it was very much about sort of giving to the poor, giving to the needy. So I'm sort of tackling that a bit more, because when everything was urbanized, you didn't have those small communities, and you didn't have like the squire who invited people in for a feast, in his big hall on Christmas Day or whatever, and everyone was a bit lost and not so sure what to do, and I think Dickens was one of the early voices that kind of started directing Christmas towards it being about family and it being about children, because it wasn't really about children until around this time.
That social element is a big Dickens theme, and it is something, as you said, that you lean into.
I don't think you could have a book that was Dickens based without talking about the poor and the social conditions in London, and especially especially a Scrooge story. I don't think you could have it without exploring that disparity a bit.
One of the things I enjoyed was you Victorianising virtue signalling.
I think the Victorians possibly invented virtue signalling. I haven't done as deep a research into it as I could, but I think that was probably the dawn of that sort of thing. Because, like I say beforehand, it was very much like you gave to the people you knew. If there was someone in your village that needed something, you gave it to them. Whereas if you're in a big city, there's lots of people suffering and nobody knows because it's all behind closed doors. Or there's actually suffering right in the street and people are just ignoring it. Scrooge thinks that, part of the way to save his soul is to give generously to the benevolent feast for the poor, and sort of buy his way into redemption.
On a similar vein, several times in the book there are criminals who are compared, or who compare themselves with respectable businessmen, and you've got one character, and I won't say who says, "I grow fat on the labours of others, and if that doesn't make me a gentleman, I don't know what will."
I suppose I was writing that almost with my modern head on, because it's a topic that we talk about a lot these days, about billionaires and how are they a benefit to society and that kind of thing. But actually, the Victorian concept of having a private income was kind of even worse in a way. I know the billionaires are a damn sight richer, but this idea that never having done any work
made you better than
everyone else. Yeah, exactly. And having X amount of thousand a year meant that you were somehow special. The person that you're talking about, I think it's safe to say that he's a thief.
I didn't want to reveal
gets
too much.
Other people to thieve for him. He is making a good point, which is like, why are these gentlemen any better than me? And he, wouldn't aspires to be a gentleman.
Yes. Changing tack slightly. You switch perspective between a number of different characters throughout the book, and we we see what's unfolding through various different perspectives. Which ones were your favourites to write?
I really, really enjoyed writing Scrooge because I just really love this idea of this introvert, grumpy old man who somehow has to become the spirit of Christmas. And I also really enjoyed Tim because I really enjoy writing from a child's point of view.
Yes, Tim was great.
He's like 8 years old now, and he's a little bit better. He's well enough to do what my editor calls vibing around London.
I think Dickens referred to it in the same way.
Yeah. And he's working for Scrooge as an office boy, but Scrooge has basically given him that job so that he can like help with his schooling and give the Cratchit family a bit of extra money. And he's, obviously totally fallen in love with the boy. He's got a, real fatherly feeling towards him. Yeah, so I really enjoyed, because he's obviously very innocent, but also, he's lived in Victorian London, and he's got and he's also been very ill, and he's watched his family worry about him. So he's innocent, but he also kind of knows when adults are telling him lies to make him feel better, because he's had that a lot. He's canny in other ways.
Yes.
And he also, really wants to prove that there's more to him than being tiny and virtuous.
Something I liked was that there was no one genius solving this mystery.
It did become a bit of a team effort. Tim's dad has been arrested for the crime, so he has a very strong motive to solve it as well. And Scrooge obviously feels really guilty because he didn't stand up for him and didn't manage to buy his way out of prison. So he's obviously, and he doesn't doubt that Bob is innocent.
Yes.
Because he knows Bob and he's known him for 10 years and he knows that he wouldn't do that.
I should say at this point, I had a slight problem with Bob Cratchit. There's no way down to your writing, in that whenever you mention Bob Cratchit, I pictured Kermit.
I'm going to have to put in some reference to him being green in the next one, just as a special little Easter egg for you.
So the ghosts in the book, and as we've said, there are several. They're there for so much more than just a bit of spooky atmos. Could you tell us a little bit about the role that they play in the book?
One of the point of view characters actually is the ghost of the girl, the woman that's murdered at the beginning. So she is actually the first voice that you hear and she's already dead by the time you hear from her.
And she thinks it's Scrooge's fault.
She completely blames him. Originally, when I first came up with the story, because I had this whole social justice thing going on in the Dickens and whatever, Christina was a bit boring. She was just this wonderful person that died, and I couldn't think about why anyone would possibly want to kill her because she hadn't done anything wrong. And then it wasn't until I started to do some character work on her that lots of motives started to emerge.
Right.
And that I also became more intrigued by her. I do this sometimes. I write different POV characters just to get into people's heads, and then I go, actually, that kind of works. Because obviously you can't have it that the ghosts come along and say, it was him. That guy in the corner with a knife. That would make it a really short, really boring, unsatisfying book.
Yeah.
So there obviously have to be reasons why she's not saying or doesn't know. She actually doesn't know who killed her. But I think the main thing is that her motivation in the book is not to solve her murder. She's got her own mission.
One idea that you have very much taken from Dickens and ran with is the idea of the ghosts being weighed down by chains that they forged in their own lifetimes. Again, without plot spoiling, can you talk about that at all, or is that a bit more difficult?
The interesting thing about following Dickens, apart from he is one of the greatest writers of modern times and is incredibly popular, is that he set up he did a lot of world building in a really short novella, and he set it all up, and then I had to make my ghosts work within that.
Yes.
If everyone gets a chain, then you have to get a chain. Scrooge is scared of his own chain in the future, and he sometimes thinks he hears clinking. But obviously the chain is symbolic, I think Dickens always meant it for it to be symbolic, of being weighed down by the things you thought would set you free when you were alive. But that gave me the conundrum of, okay, so how's this chain going to work on this young woman that died in the prime of her life and looks pretty innocent. Like I say, when she started out, she was kind of boring and hadn't done anything wrong. And then I was like, oh no, she's got to have a chain, and then that immediately makes it more interesting.
Yes.
What does she do to get her chain?
A lot of them are being condemned for things outside their control. Scrooge is, for instance, he's obsessed with the chains he's going to get because he's not celebrating Christmas but very well. But yet Tiny Tim's dad is in prison and it's his fault. It's his fault he's still there. And and everything's conspiring against him. And it does feel like Rumpelstiltskin, where a girl is expected to spin gold out of straw, that sort of impossible task.
The idea of being perpetually weighed down with chains, even if you're basically a good person who occasionally when they were 14 shoplifted from Tesco or something, that's just like really objectionable. I didn't want it to be that simple.
Your book does pose questions about the nature of goodness. At one point, Scrooge says, goodness is not an easy path, Marley. And someone says, there's no pure good or pure evil. There's just humans, subject to their own needs and desires, doing the best they can not to be too bad. What would you say constitutes a good life, or a good man, or a good woman?
I've got this terrible, terrible curse where I don't think there's such a thing as pure good and evil. That's pretty much me thinking that. Most people are trying their best. Some people are not. Everything's always more complicated than when you look at it.
Yes.
When the killer's revealed, obviously they are not a very nice person, but at the same time, it's not that kind of like mwahaha kind of evil. I started with the characters and worked on that, and actually changed who did it quite late on.
And at one point, Scrooge says, changing one's ways is not as straightforward as changing one's socks. Is this something else you're telling us, or is this just pure Scrooge?
I do change my socks regularly.
and do you find it easy?
It's still quite spry for a lady in my years.
Significantly easier than changing your ways.
Yeah, I mean that is the whole principle of the whole book. What I said about the last scene of Scrooge of A Christmas Carol, and then he lived happily ever after, and it's not that simple.
Yeah,
that's kind of the whole reason I wanted to write it, so summed up in that sentence. Keep going.
Scrooge observes that the past weaves you into the person you are today. How has your past made you who you are today?
That's an interesting one.
How has it made you the writer you are today, if that's any easier?
Talking about this with my husband, actually, about how everyone has an origin story. And his origin story, he's a computer programmer, he's a software engineer rather. And his origin story is that, when he was 8 years old, his dad bought his brother Sinclair ZX81 or whatever the current model was at the time. And the brother wasn't interested in it. And he got into it and he started getting all these magazines and he started coding little lines and then he became more interested in graphics. And then, and it's kind of, his origin story is this 8-year-old who just saw this computer and ga-dang, magic happens. And, I have origin stories about, being curled up with a book all afternoon and, people telling me I had an amazing imagination. And, and then if you look at it like that as a story, it almost seems inevitable that he was going to end up as a software engineer and I was going to end up writing books. But, I was also quite into horses and I was also, and he was also quite into basketball. And, so we could have gone a zillion different ways, but our origin story, if he was a basketball player, his origin story would be completely different.
Yes. We want to make sense of today, don't we, in context?
Yeah.
So we're then selective in where we look in the past.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's next? I think you said something about another Scrooge book.
I'm working on that at the moment. I'm not as far in as I should be because I've been doing mad publicity stuff for the first one, but I am quite excited to be going back into that world, and it's a very easy, nice world to be in.
Yeah.
And let's face it, he's still got a fair bit to learn. And Tiny Tim too, and hopefully we'll delve more into the Mrs. Tassel story as well. who is like, you know, one of my other major characters, and she's a non-Dickens invention. Yeah, I'm having fun kind of experimenting with it all, and just ask me in about March and I'm going to be like, you know, rocking in a corner.
Winding up now, where can people find you online?
Okay, so all you need to do is remember how to spell my really, really difficult to spell and remember name.
And do you want to give people a clue?
I'm on Instagram. I'm at Andreina Cordani. That's at AndreinaCordani. And then actually on Twitter, I'm also that. And if you want me on Blue Sky, I'm all the Blue Sky stuff with Andreina Cordani. Or my website, which hopefully will be updated by the time this comes out, is www.andreinacordani.com.
Thank you so much, Andreina. It's been absolutely lovely having you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
And happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Yes,
happy Christmas to you too.
And to you. And
God bless us, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for watching. And please do rush out and get your dose of Christmas murder from Andreina's books.
Please do. Please
also don't forget to like the podcast, to give us 5-star reviews. Anything like that really helps with the algorithm and helps people to find out what we're doing here.
Yes, and if you subscribe, you'll be notified to get more of the same.
And what could be better?
Exactly.
Anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you again, Andreina.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Bye.